Welcome back. The Washington Nationals are in the market for a new manager. 1 year after skipper Matt Williams was named National League Manager of the Year, he is out of a job, a victim of the team's failure to meet the heightened expectations that everyone had heading into the 2015 season. We focus now on the decision to part ways with Williams, the big roster moves that are expected going forward, and that search for a new dugout skipper. Reporter Chelsea Janes covers the team for the Washington Post and joins us now. Welcome. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for your time. It's sad in a way, and we'll just say this and get it over with and move on, but baseball's top 10 teams, 5 in each league, top 8, top 10, whatever it is, the playoffs, I guess, start tonight. And so for them and for their fans, this is what you wait all season for. This is what you're praying for. I'm jealous, and that it is what it is. I mean, the Nationals are not part of the conversation this postseason.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know, I think coming into this season, October was what everyone was worried about. It wasn't that they'd get there. It was could they handle it when they did, and to kind of not be there and to know that so early on has been sort of a stunning turn. And you know, ultimately, I think kind of what cost Matt Williams his job. Obviously,
there was always going to be a significant discussion. Well, if they had rallied and made the playoffs, once it became clear that this team wasn't going to the postseason, the Matt Williams discussion was always, it was inevitable. How much did his fortunes turn south when Jonathan Papelbon wrapped his hand around Bryce Harper's neck?
It's hard to say. Yesterday, you know, General Manager Mike Rizzo said there wasn't one thing that kind of tipped the scales, but I think if there was one moment that sort of illustrated why there had to be a change, that was it. You know, whether it was because he didn't see it, whether it was because his coaches didn't kind of tell him the extent of it, which kind of begs questions about communication there. There was just a lot wrong with that moment, and it was really the first time in 2 years where Matt had to say, hey, I made a mistake, and kind of fessed up to that. And so I think that was the moment where it sort of became a done deal. I don't know that it wasn't before that, but I think in the public, court of public opinion, that was where it sort of became an untenable situation.
It was going to be interesting had the Papelbon-Harper situation not unfolded the way it did. It would have been interesting whether Matt Williams could have said to Mike Rizzo and perhaps to the Lerner family, we had so many injuries and so many top players underperformed, and the starting rotation wasn't what it should be, and I never had the sort of bullpen. I mean, not that coaches are in the excuses business, but was there, again, prior to this whole meltdown at the end of the season, was there a case to be made that he did a really good job keeping them relevant when, for a team that only had its presumed starting lineup on the field, I think twice in a 162-game season?
Certainly. I think there's a case even to be made now that this is, sort of him taking all of the blame for something that was far more nuanced than, any one person. I mean, at the end, some of his mistakes sort of glared, but really, it should never have come down to 1 or 2 games or 1 or 2 bullpen decisions. This team should have been far and away better than it was. Injuries hurt. I mean, you see this with the Tigers, for example. Lost Miguel Cabrera, they're a playoff team, one guy down, and all of a sudden they're selling off their team. It changes things, and he really had a lot to deal with in that way. It hurt the rotation. You saw Strasburg go down twice, and the bullpen was just never really tooled the way it needed to be. So, I think there's an argument that he's kind of taking all the blame. I think when you heard that maybe he lost the clubhouse and then everything that happened kind of late in the year, that's when it sort of started shifting to him. But yeah, I think there's a lot happening, and he definitely kind of kept that calm demeanor the whole way, and I don't know how else you could have handled it.
In terms of the team's roster, in terms of who we as fans are going to see on the field in 2016, we should expect a lot of new faces.
I think so. I think kind of the key names that people know about, Ian Desmond, Jordan Zimmerman, are pretty much locks to be gone. It feels like there's going to be a lot of turnover because it was built as sort of this one last run for this group, but I think ultimately it won't be too much. I mean, you'll see Bryce Harper, you'll see Jason Werth, you'll see Michael A. Taylor, who we saw all year, even if we didn't expect to. Sure. So, and I think they'll try to bolster that lineup from within. I mean, some of the rookies that have come up, Trey Turner might be a part of things, Danny Espinosa might be in the middle infield. So there will definitely be change, and I think there will be a lot of it in the bullpen and obviously the coaching staff. But the turnover is not going to be quite as stark, I think, as everyone maybe feels like it is. You'll still have Ryan Zimmerman, and there will be familiar people there, but some new kind of key players around them.
There was talk at the beginning of the season that our bullpen wasn't that there could be issues there during the course of the year, and there were. Does Rizzo own that?
Yeah, he's looked back. I think he really believed that the young guys they had, Blake Trinan and Felipe Rivero, who actually turned out to be quite a find, were going to be good enough, and they weren't. And he hasn't come out and said that was a mistake, but I think kind of looking back at the bullpen he put together, he put stock in homegrown guys and a couple of veterans that hadn't had the best track record lately, like Casey Jansen, and it just didn't work. And so I think that's on Rizzo. He hasn't come out and said, hey, I should have done a better job with the bullpen, but that's something that they knew would be a problem. They tried to fix it at the trade deadline and did it the way he thought he could without giving up tons of prospects, and it just didn't work out. And obviously Papelbon's character became a huge problem. And so, I think those decisions are Rizzo's.
Is there a way back in terms of clubhouse chemistry and maybe to a certain lesser extent public perception? Is there a way back for Jonathan Papelbon after... these things are always bad, but when they happen in public, it's like they're worse because we all saw it. I don't know if it sounds right, but that's my sense.
I think that was the sense we got, that it was like, this stuff happens, but it shouldn't happen where there are cameras there. But you know what? I think he did the best job he could kind of reclaiming things when he was said, hey, I was in the wrong immediately. We were all a little bit surprised to hear that, but I don't know. I think it's tough. I mean, he was booed within 2 months of being at Nationals Park, and people really, really took issue with that. And it's you can't choke anybody, but you can't choke Bryce Harper. That is the one guy. If he had hurt him seriously, I don't know what would have happened. So I think there's a way back. I think he might be back next year. It's going to be tough to deal a guy you owe $11 million who just choked the best player on the planet, but it's going to be tough, and he's going to have to kind of keep his head down and stay out of the public eye for a while.
It's probable that I'm not as savvy a fan as I should be, but I was surprised a little bit to see Jason Werth become such a defensive liability. He's a face of the franchise, and I presume he's under contract, paid a lot of money. Does that become an issue down the road? I mean, you would hate for a big moment in a playoff game for some routine fly ball to be misplayed into a triple or something at the worst possible time. I mean, I know he brings a lot to the table, but is that a subject of discussion?
He certainly looked uncomfortable there. I think more uncomfortable in left field than anyone thought. And whether it'll stay that way, I don't know. I think he's fine. He looked great in right field. He played there for a couple of years, and when Harper was out and they moved him to right, Werth looked completely fine. So I think he was, just uncomfortable in left field. It's a very different angle, like a completely different, a lot of routes and reads, and I think he's kind of suggested that he was still getting used to it out there. And so I think next year we'll know if he's a true defensive liability out there or what. But he's getting up there, the speed's down, and he didn't have a spring training to learn that position either. He switched before this season, was injured for a lot of the time, and so I think that plays a part. But I think the Nats are going to have to kind of look for like a fourth outfielder to spell him and keep Bryce healthy and just be there just in case Werth really has trouble out there and can't stay healthy or whatever the problem is. But you're not wrong. He did not look comfortable out there.
Who are the Nationals looking at? And I know, of course, it's early, but in terms of a replacement manager, are there names out there? Are there people we think, based on Mike Rizzo's history in the league, connections he has, the types of the philosophy that might attract him, or whatever the considerations are? What can you tell us about the search for a new manager, admittedly in its infancy?
Right, and there haven't really been names from anyone in the organization, all sort of speculating on fit and history, but people have thrown out Cal Ripken Jr.'s name. Frankly, I'd be a little bit surprised, just because that's another rookie manager. Obviously a huge figure around here that people beloved and well thought of, but to go with another rookie manager after Matt Williams, I think would be kind of a huge risk for Rizzo. He'd have to be right. I think a guy like Bud Black, who was fired from the Padres earlier this year, he's a pitching first guy. He was a major league pitcher, and the bullpen use and kind of managing the staff was something that people criticized in Williams. Black's also a veteran guy. He relates well to players, very well thought of. So I would expect him to sort of at least be in consideration and be like a very strong candidate. And then there are some of the guys I've interviewed in the past. There's Dave Martinez, just kind of names like that are kind of hidden on benches around the league and have worked under well-respected managers. Martinez, I think, is under Joe Madden right now, and just guys like that maybe are a little under the radar with a little bit less experience, but have learned from the best. And so I think it'll be a really wide-ranging search. Rizzo said he wants to kind of emphasize experience, and we'll see where that funnels. But I think Bud Black is one guy that's really emerged in kind of everyone's mind as someone that'd be a good, easy fit to kind of fix the ills that plagues them.
The Nationals are still believed to have a really rich and deep farm system and a lot of great prospects. I mean, I guess everyone thinks they have prospects, and it's easy to talk about talent as it's coming through the pipeline. No one's a guarantee to make it big in the majors. It sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't. Is that true? Are there exciting youngsters who we'll be seeing, if not next year, then in the near-term future?
Absolutely, and that's one reason I think Rizzo was safe this year in the midst of all this, is he built this farm system really up from nothing from when it was in Montreal and in the years right after that. But they've got a lot of young kids. We saw some of them: Trey Turner, Wilmer Defoe, Pedro Severino, the catcher, who's thought to be one of the best defensive catchers in the minor leagues. And then you got pitchers like Lucas Giolito, who is tremendously well thought of, and I've seen him pitch, and it's really something to see. So, there's guys coming up, and Joe Ross, even, who we saw this year, there's a lot of young talent there, and they're in a good position to contend long-term, too, which I think kind of eases this thing of this season, if that's possible for them.
Mike Rizzo promised that Matt Williams would not twist in the wind, and he did not. The decision came very quickly.
Right.
Very quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's the way to do it. It's everyone was speculating, and they had to kind of get that off their chest and get ready to move forward, I guess.
And the time to start planning for 2016 for those teams not in the postseason now, well, it's here.
Right.
Reporter Chelsea Janes covers the Washington Nationals for the Washington Post. Great having you here. Thanks very much for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
We'll talk with you again. We'll step aside here. Back though with more News Talk right after this.